talk about this new project. It is a partnership project. It's a new 2-year grant that we were awarded from USDA, so it's really exciting. It has been evolving constantly. So this is one of those projects where each time Dr. Brooks and I get to have conversations with different people, we learn things. So we really hope that this is even a two-way conversation. So ask questions, because we'll probably think of new things and learn things together. But before I really get started, my name is Dr. Kristen Moore, pronouns she, her. I'm a program coordinator for this project.
And I'm Dr. Dominique Brooks, pronouns she, her, and I'm also a coordinator for this project.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I know we've kind of talked to Washington 4-H program a little bit about this a couple months ago. So I'm really excited to now really share with you like really concrete ways either you can get involved, teachers that you partner with, the youth or students that you work with too, because we're really starting to get rolling, which is really exciting. So DIVE4Ag, it's a really fun acronym. It means distance immersive virtual education. It's kind of a little play on words. If you think about the VR goggles, in Oregon 4-H, we really like to do acronyms. So that was the kind of premise behind that. And this is an equal partnership with OSU pre-college programs and OSU 4-H youth development as well. So I kind of explained a little bit earlier. So it's a 2-year project. This was a rapid response call that was sent out by USDA to do career college readiness and in agricultural education engagement with kids K through 12. So this is really the premise that came behind this. It's a really fun partnership because there's a lot of different aspects of this project. The cool thing is the virtual reality apps, which is one of the big things, but there's a lot of really more powerful components of this project. Doing virtual learning with students is really hard. I find this in my 4-H work all the time to keep kids engaged, but it's also really difficult too because of the social emotional learning and trying to keep kids really engaged with this work. So we're really excited that all these different components of the project can really help bring this to life. The cool thing is we're highlighting Northwest agriculture. So the 5 experiences that we're going to highlight with the virtual reality apps is dairy, horses, urban agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and aquaculture, which is really cool. So I will also show you. So we're doing these virtual reality apps. One of our key partners on this grant is Time Looper. Time Looper is a company and they've created these virtual and augmented reality experiences, and they've done a lot with state parks and museums. So if you ever have time and you want to download the apps, it's free if you do it on your phone. I don't have the smartest phone, but I have an iPhone. So if you go to the App Store and look up Explore, I highly recommend it. You can check it out to see what the capabilities and the potentials of these things are, especially when you have kind of that agriculture framework in mind. My favorite one is the redwood trees. You can kind of see this huge tree in your living room. There's also some really cool ones about the Grand Canyon. And the cool thing with this grant that all of the components and all of the different programs that we're creating are going to be open source and readily available. So Oregon Ag in the Classroom and Washington Ag in the Classroom are also 2 big partners on this project as well. So that will be really also helping to help disseminate out all of these information once it's kind of up and running. But right now we're kind of in that creation piece, which is a really big term, but it's going to be really fun because another aspect of this grant is the youth co-creation. So we're really trying to recruit high school students right now to be involved in actually building out these virtual reality apps, which I think is a really cool opportunity. So this is a toolkit. These are just an infographic kind of describing what I've already kind of said a little bit. So the virtual reality experiences is like the really cool thing. These apps also have the capability to not only be viewed in like a VR goggles, but you can just use your phone. So you don't have to have that equipment, but this grant does pay out for different toolkits. So educators that sign up to be a part of this grant. Once we start creating the virtual reality app, so we'll start being able to set up a system where you can borrow the equipment. So if you're engaging young people in your 4-H programs, or maybe with schools that you work with, that you have that toolkit at your disposal and you can use that, because it will make it a little bit cooler. The other really interesting aspect of this is that youth co-creation piece. So right now we're recruiting high school students, and this is a stipend opportunity. And we're using the 4-H Teens as Teachers model. So we're going to be doing training with them starting the end of March. And then after they have been trained, they'll really start working with the 5 different subject matter experts that we have on this grant for each of those virtual reality experience. So for the dairy, the aquaculture, the horses, the urban and sustainable. And that would be a really interesting process. For me, education, to be able to teach somebody something, you really have to be a master of that knowledge as well. And that's a really interesting learning process, to be able to have that much knowledge to get somebody else excited about something. And that's really some life skills that extension, a lot of youth development work that we do in 4-H. And I think it's pretty powerful. So we're really excited to finally get ready with some training, start recruiting kids. So if you have students in mind, at the end of this, we'll show you ways that kids can apply to be a part of this program. The other cool thing is, I don't know if y'all have ever done some virtual reality stuff. The engagement piece, excuse me, is pretty critical. So the cool thing and the power from this project are these monthly activities. So it's not just a virtual reality app that's going to be deployed and a kid could look at it and then they kind of move on, but it's also these monthly activities. So the Ag Science Cafes is one of them. And this is a program where we're just connecting people that have really inspiring careers in agriculture and STEM and connecting them to young people. So there'll be a component that's like a hybrid of on-demand content and also live sessions. And this is a really cool program because also the STEM professionals engage in some sort of hands-on activity. So it's a really fun experience to work with professionals on that science communication piece to get kids excited about. But also the Teens as Teachers kids that we recruit are going to be helping in that planning process as well. So that's also another really great opportunity for the high school students recruited for Teens as Teachers to really develop public speaking skills, to be able to talk to somebody else about their career and get sort of that learning knowledge going too. And I'm also excited about that program because it does kind of give this opportunity to tell different sides of the story. So for example, right now, the first app we're working on is the dairy. So we're talking a lot about dairy, we're talking a lot about milk. We're highlighting one farm over in Eastern Oregon right now, and that's our site. But there's a lot of different careers involved with dairy that may not be like working on a dairy farm. So one person that we have on board to be an Ag Science Cafe person, she's a professor down at Cal Poly, and she studies animal ethics and welfare in the dairy industry. And that's pretty much her whole research program. So it's a really interesting piece for kids to learn about more like animal science. We also have somebody else who's done a lot of international agricultural work. So worked in the Peace Corps, worked in Vietnam. How do you teach people in a different country about raising animals, and that cultural aspect is really interesting. So that's another person that's on board for an Ag Science Cafe. So it's a lot of different opportunities in agriculture. We really want to give that opportunity for youth to understand that you don't have to have just this one career to be a part of agriculture. There's all these different really cool things that you can do that really can tie into it. And then the other interesting piece is we're doing the professional development. So we're recruiting teachers to be a part of this. So there'll be at least 2 different professional development opportunities each year. In order to be getting a stipend, we'll just require help out with some recruitment for these monthly activities, and also for the end of the project, which is the interactive virtual lab component. And that one's really cool. So OSU pre-college program does a program called Smile, and they have these kind of a challenge events at the end of the program, which I think is really cool for students to really get real world problem solving opportunities. So they're presented with a problem, they have to solve it. And so we're really excited to bring that to this program. And I'll let Dr. Brooks talk about the Beaver Hangouts portion, if that's okay. You're the expert on talking about that one.
Is that my cue? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, cue.
So yeah, Beaver Hangouts traditionally is college students from Oregon State basically using whatever virtual platform to talk to K through 12 kids across Oregon. We've definitely expanded beyond that, but the premise is still the same, where we want to facilitate and foster like that good positive relationship between college students and then students who aren't in college yet. So with DIVE4Ag, the goal is going to be having those college students work on, or I guess help students work through an activity, or learn more about whatever topic we're covering that month. So, and I do want to pause and just apologize for the fact that my camera isn't on. I do like to usually have my camera on when I'm speaking, but internet stuff. I just don't want to risk things getting dropped and cut out. So apologize for that. But back to Beaver Hangouts. The goal is to get the students more informed about whatever topic so that they're ready for the Ag Science Cafe. And so that will be a live opportunity. We can record it, and the activities or whatever we choose to do in that particular hangout will be made available to everyone as part of the toolkit. But yeah, this is, I would say, like that's probably the one that hinges the most on having a live audience. So we did a lot of, I guess we covered to a great extent a lot of this. So just talked about Beaver Hangouts. The Teen Science Cafe for this project is the Ag Science Cafe. And so that's where we have the professional kind of share with students their area of expertise. And then in terms of the on-demand content, I think most of it we've covered. One aspect that we did not talk about was as part of this, these monthly activities, we also will be interviewing a professional and that person will ideally be interviewed by one of the students from the Teens as Teachers program. So we want to get them involved. And as Kristen mentioned, it's important to us that this is an opportunity to co-create some stuff with the audience, essentially, that we're creating it for. So I'm assuming with this slide, so Kristen, I don't know if you want to show the website, because I think that might be a good segue to that. Because so the website is where we will have everything that you need to know in terms of DIVE4Ag. And so as you can see at the top, the website is just dive4ag.oregonstate.edu. And it is, I would say 80% done, but 100% accessible. You can still access the site. We're constantly updating. As Kristen mentioned, things just change every day. It's like the more we learn, the more we realize like we don't know. So we're slowly but surely filling in all the pages. And as the toolkit items become available, they'll be accessible as well.
Yeah, so for right now, this page is probably the most informative one. So for the Teens as Teachers, young people can start to apply now. So our application is live. So we have enough stipends for 30 high school students. And we're hoping that they'll be a part of this project for at least 2 years. So they can't be seniors right now or graduating this semester. So juniors will be okay. So we'll work with them throughout the rest of the year and work with them in their senior year as well. We are asking upfront for them to commit about 2 hours a week for this work because we're really creating things. So it's a really fun opportunity, but we're trying to be very transparent about the time commitment that we're asking of the Teens as Teachers.
And so I will mention when Kristen clicked on the link and said like, this is the page, it's the DIVE4Ag toolkit that she clicked on.
Yeah.
Just at the top of the page. And that is the home of all of our experiences.
So we've kind of done the run through. We'll take a pause. Is there any questions, any comments, ideas?
Are
Yeah,
you,
Go ahead, Kelly.
sorry, are you specifically looking for teams that have that mastery in those specific areas? Or are you looking for teams that have an interest and then providing them with that?
That's a really great question. All kids. If there is a kid that is excited to learn, we welcome them. If there's a kid that has a ton of dairy experience or loves horses and owns horses and rides and just wants to be a part of it, they're welcome too. So we're really trying to make this accessible to everybody. And that's a big piece of, you know, people that have a deeper understanding of agriculture, if it's closer to them, like farms, to even kids that may not know where, you know, the cheese comes from, whether they get from a grocery store. Just a willingness to learn.
Do you have a specific age range for the teams that you're looking for, or just, you know, basically 9th through 12th grade, or 13 to 18?
I think we're looking more at what grade they're in. So we really can't work with seniors if they're graduating, because the really powerful piece of this is if they're a part of the full 2 years of the grant. So we're really looking for kids that can commit to that. So freshmen, sophomore, juniors.
And you said there's a stipend attached to it. Okay. I had a quick question about the virtual reality stuff, and this is kind of one of those things that I run into a lot because so I live in a very rural part of Washington. We have a very high Hispanic population, a lot of farm labor type workers, things like that. And so we're always looking for opportunities with them. And the one thing that I see, one of the difficulties that I see with the virtual reality is the availability of phones or gadgets or, you know, whatever they need to have that experience. And you know, so I guess part of that is with the grant and everything like that, is that being addressed? Because I also do a lot of after school programs with those kids. And, you know, I don't foresee even most of my middle school kids having smartphones. You know, they may have a phone. I do a lot with, you know, 4th, 5th grade as well. They definitely don't have phones. We don't have a ton of access to Wi-Fi through the school districts, things like that. So that's been one of my big questions with the virtual reality piece is how are you seeing that being utilized and moved and everything else in particularly those low income areas?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. So 2 things pop into mind. So this grant does pay out for equipment, and there will be a system. We haven't quite worked out the details yet, but really recruiting educators like 4-H educators, SMILE educators, and teachers as partners of this grant will help us create a system that people can borrow the equipment. So you can bring that. So people don't have to have a phone to participate in this. And then the other thing that's another strategy is these apps you can project from your own phone. So it may be a bit of a different experience, but if you were an educator and you brought your own tablet or your own phone, one, you don't have to have Wi-Fi there. Like once you download the app on your phone, it's there. You don't have to have access to internet, but you can project it using different screens and monitors, so then they kind of follow along with you. So it'll be a bit of a different experience. And I can see that kind of being a bit of an advantage as an educator standpoint, because if you want to talk about certain things and you have lesson plans, it would be hard if kids are just like in the virtual space looking at all these different things. You're like, oh no, I want you to look at this first and we're gonna talk about this. So then they would follow along with you. So really you would only need to have one device. That's another strategy.
And then I would say, like, in terms of the students participating in the Teens as Teachers program, it's unfortunately, it wasn't built into the grant to include supports for that. So while they could absolutely participate in our program, we would need them to have access to stable internet and then some sort of device where they can Zoom essentially, and like some reliable internet access.
Okay.
And will you guys be using anything besides Time Looper for some of the virtual and augmented reality programming? Or you're not sure yet?
Time Looper is our go-to for that.
Okay.
Did you have any other ideas? Was that
You know, I've been seeing a whole bunch because we actually, the three of us are, we've submitted a proposal to the National 4-H STEM Conference with the idea of immersive learning and virtual experiences. And so, you know, there are other places, and I'm happy to come up with a list and share with you guys. You know, if we're focused on ag, that I need to, you know, delve more into, but I think there are other options besides just Time Looper. But I've been through the program. It's pretty cool. So I think there's a lot to see there.
Yeah, so in terms of the grant, like Time Looper was explicitly written into the grant. So we're kind of locked into them in terms of this grant. Outside of this work though, I still do pre-college outreach stuff. And so I would personally be interested in that list, but also do not want to put anything on your plate. It's just,
No, I'm working on that anyway. So I'm happy to share those resources and any way that we can get it to be an enriching experience for youth to kind of see themselves in science. I'm happy to, you know, I don't know, there's just a lot out there and it's a little overwhelming, but I'll let you know what I can come up with.
awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say like the fact that this grant had to be thrown together so quickly, I think a lot of those accessibility considerations and like equity focused things kind of didn't make it explicitly into the grant. And I'm positive that any future iterations, we will address those.
So that does bring me to kind of my next question. Is you had mentioned sort of the target audience, and I noticed sort of middle school, high school. All of what you've presented here to me so far kind of feels almost more like an urban outreach. How much of this is going to also be directed to rural communities, rural kids, things like that? You know, where our 4-H program is highly agriculturally based. Even a lot of our kids in our schools are associated in agriculture in one way or another, whether it's a parent that works in it or, you know, works for even things like the Corps of Engineers or, you know, Fish and Wildlife and all that stuff. I'm just curious. I can see, you know, the teens as educators as having some really phenomenal resources, but then I also see, again, and I'm going to go back to a little bit of that Hispanic population, because sometimes they don't see themselves outside of that farm culture. And so one of the things we're really trying to work on is pulling them out of that whole idea of that, you know, science is only agriculture, you can only work in agriculture. And so we're trying to pull them into, you know, exploring different things as well. And obviously robotics and drones and all of that stuff is very much a part of agriculture, GPS, you know, all of that funness. And so I'm just curious, you know, content wise, and I know, you know, ag obviously covers a massive amount of ground. But you know, the true intent behind who really is the target. You know, you mentioned the cheese making and things like that. So
yeah, so two thoughts come into mind. To me, agriculture impacts everybody. And we really want to bring that learning to everybody. And one of the key pieces of this project is recruiting educators. And so people like you, we really hope you sign up to be an educator, because that's how we reach rural communities. I know OSU pre-college program. They have a program that's just focused on rural communities, and it's called SMILE. I forget the acronym, Dominique.
Science,
Math.
math, investigative learning, education.
Yeah. So we're also recruiting SMILE educators to also be a part of that. So that's one strategy that we have to really make sure that this toolkit is accessible to everybody. And then also too, you really kind of touch on something I'm really passionate about. Agriculture really has a narrow view, and it's just so much wider than that. There's so much science and engineering and technology and math, and that's really truly the direction that agriculture is going. And there's so many different ways agriculture is being empowered by those different professionals. So those monthly activities, I think, will really be key to really show a much wider opportunity for people to get involved in agriculture, to really just meet people that have interesting careers and learn all the different ways that they got involved. I know for me, working with young people, sometimes in my programs, you know, if they understand what they want to do when they grow up, that's amazing. But sometimes too, they think it's a very linear process, like, oh, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have this job and that's what I'm going to be. And I know in my experience, that was not the case. My career journey has been twisty turny, and I have learned so much along the way, and I've really embraced it. And that's another key piece I really want kids to understand, is that you will learn so many cool things along the way if you're open to opportunities, and you can really build skills. And those are the things that really make you set up for success in your career. So that's the other thing too, is to really like humanize and show all the different ways that people have gained experience. It's not just they went to college, got this degree, and then they walked out those doors and got that job. Nope, that very rarely happens. But I'm also hoping from the social emotional learning aspects, it helps to tell like true stories and build resilience and know that that's okay. And that's a big part of life. So
And I'll also say that regardless of where a kid is coming from, I would be willing to put money that there's going to be at least one site on our app that they don't know anything about. That, and we also have opportunities outside of that. So like those monthly opportunities, and me and Kristen are being pretty intentional about doing things that the app won't do. So, and it'll all come as part of the same toolkit. So they'll have access. So like Kristen mentioned, maybe one of our professionals that we focus on for an ag science cafe, that person is going to be in some STEM field that is related to agriculture or has a technology that was developed for agriculture, but is not what you would think of when you think ag profession. So while the virtual reality experiences, they're kind of the big project, like the big outcome of this project, there are also other aspects of this that will help us filter in that additional content that the students might not get from the app.
Cool.
I say,
Yeah,
we are absolutely open to suggestions on those as well.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the classes that I've been teaching in after school is we do industries of Washington. And so we start out with the geographics of Washington, and we talk about the rainfall and how it impacts the different industries. And then we go into things like, you know, the rivers and the dams and how they contribute, and all the way over to Boeing, and, you know, all the way up into those general directions. And I think in a lot of ways, it's really helpful for those kids to start connecting that that a lot of the things that we consider agriculture are also the things that are not only producing our food, but are producing our electricity and are producing our, you know, are driving our technology in a lot of ways. You know, GPS wouldn't have really even become a thing if it really hadn't been for the agricultural community pushing that as an efficiency tool. And so yeah, and I agree. I mean, I grew up on a farm and have a degree in agriculture, and am very passionate about, kids understanding and learning and exploring. And I think that's probably one of the most important pieces is that, and this is my kind of another question I had, when you said we're talking about educators and having that, it's sort of intense knowledge. I guess my question in some degrees relates back to the whole experiential learning. And I know that a lot of my kids who end up becoming very fascinated, very experienced in their own area, it's because they've found something that they're excited about, because they've explored multiple opportunities. And they don't necessarily have somebody hand feeding them all the information. They literally are exploring it and they're learning it on their own. And so I guess I worry a little bit about that idea, because I've run across other places too where people are like, oh no, you have to know everything to teach it. And it's like, you really don't. The whole goal is the experiential learning part, is get them excited about it and then turn them loose and let them explore on their own. So yeah, so I don't know, just a kind of a thought, and I don't know if you have response or what. I mean, or maybe I took that totally wrong out of context.
No, that was great. I think that's a big part of the Teens as Teachers training, is debunking the myth of what educating others is like. It's there's so much learning involved that you don't need to know everything. That's not the point. It's just to show people like just a bit of a path and then kind of learn together. So it's a really interesting program. We're not going to tell the kids, this is what the dairy is, and this is what aquaculture is, and that's it. It's a very like lived experience, and we're trying to make experiential learning work in a virtual space. So having a real live conversation with an ag professional or STEM professional, make it more engaging. So there's actually like a hands-on activity that they walk through that kids can really engage with. It's not a lecture. It's not a one-way conversation. Having more on-demand content, so you can access it at a time that's more convenient, because it is really hard to get kids in real time live in a virtual space because of just life and what everything's going on. So we're really trying to be intentional in those aspects. I will say, a lot of your comments are bringing up some really interesting stuff. If y'all ever think of somebody that would be really amazing for this project, like maybe it's a community partner that you work with, let us know. I mean, that would be cool if they could be an ag science professional and be a highlight for a month. So if there's anything that y'all think that would be really powerful for this project and also really highlight Washington, yeah, let us know, because that would be really cool too.
Well, I'm going to throw this one out there. I do have some contacts at the Corps of Engineers in Walla Walla. And, the bulk of what they do is salmon, the salmon runs. They work, like Walla Walla has this creek that essentially runs through, but it's also a salmon run. And the creek itself is basically run through this concrete culvert. So it's not very salmon friendly. But then of course, they're working constantly with the dams and everything, and the salmon runs and the fish runs, and and then even just providing water to Central Washington, which is one of the major producers of most of a fair amount of the produce that's sent across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And without that water supply coming from those dams and those main water sources, Central Washington would be nothing but a desert. So I think that's one of the places I would love to see what kind of connections we could make with them. Just because of some of it's debunking the myths about the dams.
Yeah.
And the supposed damage and everything else they're causing. At the same time, it's like, okay, what are we doing to make them better and to make them more, and what would happen if we took them away? I hate to say this, what people don't realize is most people in California would have no electricity if it wasn't for the dams in Washington.
You're absolutely right.
And those are powerful stories. And I truly think what 4-H and a lot of youth development organizations do well is really engaging kids to think critically. So how do you form an opinion? All the different things that you need to learn. So yeah, if definitely share our website with any connections that you have. And if people are interested, you can send me or Dominique a direct email, or we have a DIVE4Ag email as well, and we can definitely make that happen. That would be really cool. I mean, we're doing the dairy experience right now, so it's very hard for me to think about the other 4 that we're building out. But the aquaculture one is probably the one I'm not so secretly excited. I'm really excited about. We're going to talk about like oyster farming, which is a really interesting experience because this is where the virtual reality piece really comes in. People really don't know anything about how oysters are made and farmed. And so this virtual reality piece gives us this platform that never existed. So it's not just, oh, we're doing like a modified farm tour, and, you know, kids may have had access to traveling out to a farm and seeing how a dairy cow is raised. But this one's like, no one's ever really seen this besides the people that are actually in this industry. So definitely the aquaculture, and we are very well known for salmon production, so that would be really cool.
I'm really interested in how, I mean, this is really going to be a collaborative experience for the kids, and they're going to have to communicate with each other, and they're going to have some mentoring, and you know, in the process of developing these lessons and ideas. I mean, it's, you know, STEM is what the focus is, but yet it's all these 21st century skills that are so important. And I mean, I think there's a lot of kids that I'm going to ask. We have urban, suburban, and rural in King County, and so it's kind of it's interesting. And I think I have a couple of kids in particular in mind. But what I'm wondering is, how many kids have you already had express interest? So that if I widely share this, do you already have 20 spots filled? Are you still waiting to get applications in? Do you have any kind of a guideline? Like, how many people do you want us to try to recruit?
So we have room for 30. Right now, I think I checked earlier this morning, we don't have any applications in. So we've been kind of doing, me and Dominique have had this conversation with OSU pre-college program. So this is kind of the wider 4-H conversation, really focused on recruiting educators and kids for teens as teachers. So right now, we don't have any kids. So I would like to err on the side of cast a wide net.
I'll send them all your way.
Yeah, because that would be
we're
really
having
cool.
a meeting on Thursday night with our leaders for resuming some of our in-person programming. So I'll have all the project leaders and all of our club leaders there, and I will share this with them. I've already put it in our monthly newsletter, and I'll also send an email blast to all the high school kids that would be eligible for the program.
Cool.
And Melanie, I have a sheet that I can send over to you too if you have if you're putting out a newsletter, and I kind of bullet pointed all of the things that you had available. So you know.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because I mean, I'm thinking send it out to even our FFA advisors to send to their kids.
Yeah.
Or share out with their kids and whatnot. And then just as far as, you know, so signing up for an educator, that is helping to develop the curriculums. Is that what I understood? And what's the time commitment you're looking at in that direction?
So are you talking about like professionals or the kids?
Yeah, I think the professionals. So I'm just looking at this. It says, you know, sign up for educator development, or and I don't know, I may be in totally the opposite direction of where I should be, but or educator professional. Well, obviously educator, whatever. My brain is toast tonight. I apologize. But there'll be the educational opportunities for educators who are teaching, I'm assuming. Is that correct? And then there's opportunities for educators who are looking at, or that are going to help with the development. Is that, or am I totally off base?
So in terms of our professional educators, one, we use educator to encompass anyone who has an audience of kids as like part of their job. So it's not just teachers. So that's why we chose educator. But in terms of creating content, that's on us and the kids.
Okay.
All we would expect from educators is attending a professional development, helping us recruit, things like that, but no co-creation. You won't be responsible for any content.
Okay. So it'd be more facilitating potentially different programs or being a resource in that direction versus, okay. That makes
it's
more
like
sense. That was where I was like, I'm confused.
It's okay. It's more like help us get butts in the seats.
Gotcha. Perfect. That I can do.
So, I mean, I think that might be a good segue then, Kristen, to talk about the stipend opportunity for educators. So I don't know what the next slide would look like if we had it listed out on there. But basically, again, like we're recruiting educators to help us recruit students for all of our opportunities. So get students to, there it is, perfect, sign up and commit. So you all would get a stipend, and then sort of under that is what we would want to receive that stipend. So participating in the professional development and then recruiting. So for teens as teachers, that's also for like bringing kids to the Beaver Hangout opportunities and then the Ag Science cafes as well. And then Kristen mentioned the Ag Challenge at the end of year 2. And so we would also want you to kind of be a chaperone and like bring students, but we would be in charge of the experience. And by bring students, I mean making sure that they log on, kind of a thing. And then yeah, offering feedback, which you already have. And I don't know about Kristen, but yeah, I have a big page of notes. So keep it coming. But yeah, we kind of want to pull you all in as partners because we usually create this in terms of pre-college programs, which is the area that I'm with. We usually create the stuff for teachers to use to teach to the students. So we don't have direct access to the students, and you all, the educators do. So we're trying to leverage that relationship.
Okay, so then this is would be also open to potentially our volunteers and things in that direction. So I have a couple of volunteers that I'm like, this could be a really good opportunity, because not only are they sort of homeschool parents, they have a farm and they're STEM focused leaders. So I can see this fitting right into their world really well.
Yeah, absolutely. If these bullet points they're like, yep, check, got it, I would absolutely forward that opportunity. But also, again, like these are just for the educators who are interested in the stipend. If you're not interested in the stipend, any of these we would take. So you're not required to do everything unless you want the stipend. But the biggest thing right now is recruitment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you need us to participate in any of these professional development events as well, or is it just whoever we get to be the teens as teachers or educators?
So the professional development it'll be open to all, and so yes, we want you to show up.
Excellent. Okay. It sounds insanely cool. I'm really excited that you guys came up with this program.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really fun experience. I now work really closely with Dr. Brooks, and so it's a rare experience to think working at home during COVID that I have a new coworker, and especially within Oregon State University, this equal partnership between pre-college and 4-H. I mean, we're both youth serving organizations, but we're bringing a lot of our skill sets to the table, which has been a really cool partnership. But it's definitely a unique challenge. It's we're learning and developing as we're running. So it's been fun. I mean, you can only imagine, but it's been fun.
Yeah, it's definitely like a very much like the train's on the track, but while we're building the track. So it's so it's chaos and in a good way, right? Like there's a timeline and there are deadlines, but yeah, we are definitely having fun along the way. And I guess the other good part is we get to be as flexible as we see fit in terms of what things turn out to be. And so that's also been a lot of fun because we've been able to incorporate other people who probably wouldn't have otherwise been considered as part of the project. So when we say we want your feedback, like give it to us. Like we're still building this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love the feedback. And it'll be so cool. I'm really excited to start working with the Teens as Teachers kids, because then I think that could even be another opportunity where things could really evolve into something really cool. And I think it would be a really interesting opportunity to almost have kids have this lasting impact, like, oh, I created or I helped build this thing in this app, and now anybody can download it and look at it. I mean, that's such a cool experience.
Yeah, and I have one of my county ambassadors who's already building an app for magic tricks. So I'm like,
Cool.
thinking we're gonna be, and he's a kind of a hobby farm kid of sorts, but they raise sheep, and so I'm like, this could be a really good place for him.
Yeah,
So
that's always been one of the things that has struck me the most working in 4-H, just all the passions that kids have and all these like real skills that they're developing, and they don't really even know it. Like, I mean, wow, you're building an app now. That's really amazing.
yeah. Well, that's the funny thing, and I've said this for a long time. I grew up in 4-H, and 4-H got me to where I am today, because had I not had the adult mentors and the experiences that I had in 4-H, I would have probably followed the path that my dad had lined out, which was college isn't important, and get married and have babies, and that's your lot in life. And it's like, yeah, no. I got news for him. But it amazes me, though. I'm with you. I actually chose agriculture in high school because I could apply for the most scholarships through it. But it turned out to be the place that I wanted to be and the place that I love. And so it's just bringing that passion to those kids and bringing that exploration to them, and showing them that they have the ability to do these things, even if
Yeah.
their parent, their guardian, or somebody else maybe doesn't necessarily believe in those abilities.
Mhm.
And it only takes one person believing that they can do it for them to do it.
Yeah, that's something I'm really excited about. Because I'm an animal scientist now, but I was that kid. I grew up in suburban part of Raleigh, North Carolina. Didn't know about 4-H. I loved animals, and I just wished like every day that I grew up on a farm. Like I just wanted that experience so bad. Thought I had to be a veterinarian. Like, if you love animals, that's the career. I just thought that was just a pathway. And then I learned all about animal science, and I've now worked with cows and sheep and pigs and fruit flies and milked mice. And so it's just been a really wild journey that I never knew would be possible for me when I was a kid. So, it'll be really fun when we start really working with kids, especially as we get in this because we want to work with kids. So Dr. Brooks and I are really excited to really be a part of that for them. So
Yeah. Well, and I'm excited to hear that you grew up in Raleigh. I have family in just outside of Charlotte, and so I spent about 2.5 years down there. And even from that extent, the agricultural industry is so different than it is up here. And so being able to bring some of those experiences, to our kids. And I think of it, my dad my grandpa grew up on a cotton farm in Arizona, of all places. And cotton's always fascinated me. And you start thinking about the origin of cotton and then what it ultimately ends up producing, and it's like, it's all agriculture, baby. And so, yeah, I feel like, I'm super excited about the virtual reality apps. My ultimate concern is that technology that it requires to get there, and the fact that there's, we've got a lot of youth that are that really need this stuff but don't have access to the technology and the equipment. And of course, we don't have the funds to just go out and purchase, 12 or 15 iPhones or Androids or whatever.
Mhm.
So I
But
like the idea of it being able to be projected.
we could definitely use tablets, and I can talk to you more about that later, Melanie. But it's sometimes easier too if it's on a bigger screen.
Yeah.
So we could find some low cost tablets, and we were actually trying to come up with some ideas of ways to spend sort of somewhat of a windfall that we weren't counting on in STEM. So after many years of not having much, we have some resources right now, and we were actually talking about getting some of the cardboard VR viewer glasses too, and we found a source where we could get 200 of them for like $650. So it may be a way for us to share out with families that maybe aren't close to our office. And if they have a smartphone, they can download it to their phone. They might be able to borrow or even have that as a gift. So it's another way to get that technology to them. And it's something we didn't really know existed. So, well, I am really excited about all of this. I hope you get a lot of kids to participate. I know this is a terrible year in some ways for these kids in terms of engagement. We're having a hard time getting people to show up to events. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's like they're just sort of zoomed out. So being able to give them something that could be not just another Zoom meeting where they're listening, but actually working together to create, some lessons and ideas and working in a collaborative environment would be, I think, pretty exciting for the kids because they're just itching for that. So,
Yeah, we agree. Well, we appreciate your time.
sure.
10:32. We'll share out this recording because I think a lot of people couldn't attend because of internet issues and ice. So
I said I didn't want to move in the snow, and guess what we did this weekend? We moved in the snow. So it's kind of like that. You do the program and you hope everybody can attend, and then the power goes out for half the world.
So will you have another one of these kind of information nights or whatever to share, or are we just going to share out the recording?
I'll share out the recording to everybody that registered because I have all of y'all's email. If you feel like there's a big group of people that want to have this kind of two-way conversation, let us know. But right now we don't really have another plan in the works to do one of these. So
Sometimes recording is just as easy, and we asked a lot of questions. So
that is true.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And the website's up.
Nice.
Almost completely done, but it's
Woohoo!
that's one spot now that's everything will be there.
Cool.
That'll be really neat. I'm excited to look at that further. So, well, thank you. I truly appreciate it as being the first one that I've attended and have obviously much better understanding. So I'm excited to move forward and have this as a resource. So
Awesome.
yeah, it'll be great. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you both for showing up and giving us some great feedback and providing some great questions. Like, this was great. This was awesome on both ends, it sounds like.
Cool.
as I say, Michelle and I are always good for a whole bunch of questions.
Too many questions. I don't have an ag background, so I'm excited to learn from all of you. I actually came from a whole different discipline, and I'm the STEM coordinator in King County. So, but I came from a teacher training program and school librarian. So I've been working with kids for a long time, not just STEM specific, but there's so many different ways to do STEM. And Melanie and I are always talking about it's not the end result, it's the process. And whether a kid ends up being a STEM major or maybe there's some hobby related to STEM, that's my goal, that we can kind of spark that interest for them.
Yeah. Well, as we can see with COVID-19, having some literacy in the scientific process is really helpful. So that's yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Indeed.
And that's what Kelly has a background as a science teacher. So we all sort of have a, you know, that strong connection to STEM and yeah, and I agree. There's so much about it that's just, it's all about exploring it, and, you know, and then from there, and I look at it this way, our job is to get them interested in it, just like your jobs are to get them into college to finish it. So there's my 2 cents worth.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I was gonna say, I will let you go so you guys can, you know, get your family time in or whatever. And so I truly appreciate all the information though, and we'll definitely be in contact. So
Yeah. Hopefully this is the first of many conversations. We appreciate it.
absolutely.
Okay.
Stay safe, stay warm.
You too.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.